All right, everybody. Welcome back to the Be That 1% podcast. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your time and attention. And you may remember this face from, I believe, a year or two ago. Gio here has been on the podcast once before, and it was there that we went deep into how he scaled his company from nothing to multi-million-dollar brand and company, and now beyond. He has an even bigger goal, which I'm sure he'll share about today. But I wanted to bring him back because there's been a lot of growth in his life, in his business, in who he is and how he's impacted the world since we've talked last. And I think a lot of what's coming through for him would be really helpful for you all. I know a lot of you listening are entrepreneurs. You're people who want to be better at what you do, who want to continuously improve. And that's something that Gio represents and embodies really, really well. So without further ado, Gio, welcome back to the show, bro.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Great to be back.
Yeah. How you feeling?
I'm feeling good.
Yeah.
It's been an intense week, but yeah.
Just for the audience, can you update everybody on your travel schedule? Like what that actually looks like within a 3 to 4 month span of time? How many places are you visiting?
Now, to give a reference, over the last, this 5 weeks, 5 different time zones. So it's like flying every week, from bouncing back from Europe to US, both ways. Latin America coming up as well. I need to go to Peru, to Lima, but also will join you to Costa Rica.
Yeah.
And then meanwhile, we'll visit several countries in Europe, and also traveling in the US. So sometimes I'm like, why am I doing this?
That's wild, man. And for everybody, remind them what your business is and maybe what it's transitioning into.
The business I started mainly to really reduce waste in logistics. So there's a lot of trucking companies everywhere. There's a lot of capacity, but we don't know where. And we can utilize it better. So what we really try to do is creating data. So if you only look at the US, I think 96% of the trucking companies have less than 20 trucks. And like 65% of them work on email, Excel. So we really try to digitalize that, to leverage that data to really reduce waste.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. And 6 years now, or 7?
A little bit over 6 years and counting.
Yeah. Damn. Well, let's start with some fundamentals. Like when you think about business in general, how do you define it to you in your own mind?
Yeah, for me it's interesting because it feels like a hobby.
Yeah.
It's like constantly challenging to make that next step, one foot in front of another. And sometimes also reminds me to being a child again, because everything is new. You're doing things for the first time. You're exploring. You not really know what's coming up next. That's going from chaos to chaos, from challenge to challenge. And I think those curveballs is also what keeps me motivated and like energized to keep doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, that newness. I mean, you're learning something new every single day.
Yeah, and it's not about doing it perfect. We all are humans, so we make mistakes. Not always fun to be the one who is always looked at in the sense of that you need to do everything right, and I don't. Mm-hmm. That's also sometimes an interesting challenge to have the dialogue with yourself with high standards, but. Yeah.
I think your view of business being a hobby is the reason why you're able to withstand all the chaos that you put up with.
Yeah, and for me that also reflects towards like you know my background in like sports. Mm-hmm. I really believe that building companies, being an entrepreneur, really working on a high level, so not even as a company owner, but also like high demanding jobs, it's like top sport mentality. Mm-hmm. It's like constantly every day being there in and out. And the most interesting thing is, and we work together of course, but a lot of people they work really hard, but they forget to train. So the preparation before the practice. Mm-hmm. So if you all talk about like the big names in every sports, like they work out every day, they practice every day, and we not really have the time to practice. It's always the game, and yeah, again, that's why I see it as a hobby.
Yeah. Yeah. Something that Richard Branson said about what businesses that I really like, that I think you do really well, is Richard Branson thinks a business is an idea that makes someone's life better. Like that's how he defines it. So any idea that you want, as long as it's making someone's life better, then that's a good business to him.
Yeah, and I think you can see that on a micro, but also a macro level, of course. If I just look at Ctrl Chain,
yeah,
we have over 25 nationalities, so also a lot of languages.
Yeah.
And what I find inspiring is that every day when you go to the office here in the US or in Europe, the office is filled with people, and they are coming to work with me on my dream, my goals. So yeah, that's already a sort of like micro giving back, being of service kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, that's cool. What would you say are some defining characteristics, or maybe one main one that you think a good leader must possess? Like they gotta have this. They don't have this, it's not the right thing for you.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's a good thing, but I think you need to be a little bit selfish and be really stubborn, because you hear so many no's. Always people will not agree. So let's agree to disagree. That's like a big thing for me.
Yeah. So selfish in what way? And then I imagine stubborn in like, you have an idea and you got to hold firm to that, because a lot of people will say no to it, and you got to make sure that that idea doesn't die.
Yeah, exactly. And strategy is often afterwards, because then it's explainable. And yeah, it's a lot of pivoting. So, and that's what I also mean with selfish. And I don't see that as a negative thing. But if you're not able to constantly choose for yourself, believe in yourself and where you stand for, so when you would not be stubborn, then I think probably the business will close soon, like in the first 1-2 years. And I think that's also interesting. If you look at the numbers, how many businesses close in their first 12, 24 months, and how many businesses make it over 5 years.
Yeah, it's like 90-something%, right?
Yeah. So me now able to say, hey, we are over 6 years in, is also like a realization which came in like, hey, I started with nothing, just like 2 chairs, a wooden board,
right,
and let's go. And now, with Ctrl Chain, close to 100 people, and yeah, really globally active, starting to make impact. Also now moving into the SaaS offering, where we think really will boost our growth. So
that's amazing. So in the 6 years, what belief systems have you adapted or adopted that have been really helpful in managing all the chaos and the uncertainty? Like, what are things that you tell yourself when like things get hard and you're like, man, what do you keep coming back to? What's that self-talk like?
That's a really interesting question, because if I have my down days.
Yeah, we all do.
We all do. But I think still the people. So the people who keep showing up, and that you're not in it alone, you're in it together. And I think the biggest shift for me has been mainly, and also looking at you, what you gave me last year, control the controllable. So I think, if I look back 5 years ago, I was way more emotional. I was way more dreaming. And everything big, and more. And the shift of control the controllable actually accelerated that with doing less, but more. So
yeah, less in that you were less spread thin.
Yeah.
And more on the right things.
Yeah.
And that exponentially grew everything.
Yeah, and the story also makes it way easier to tell and to share, because it's not only the dreaming, it's like, hey, this is really actionable, controllable action steps we can make as a company, as a team.
Yeah.
So
yeah, people waste so much time trying to control things that they can't control. Like we're obsessed with control, and rightfully so. I mean, control is tied to safety, control is tied to reputation, control is tied to, I know that it's this way that it has to work out. And so, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just, well, I mean, it can be a bad thing, but it's normal. It's human. But
yeah. I think if you start with control the controllable, like control the story, the angle, yeah, I think there a lot of companies, but also a lot of relationships really can flourish, but also die. Because getting everyone in the same direction, okay, but getting everyone to believe in it, it's different.
Yeah. So on that, how do you get people? What have you noticed be really helpful to get people to believe in something?
I learned that a lot of people are not necessarily directly dreamers, but they are believers. I think there are a different breed of people. If I look at myself, I think you really need to give me one straw and I will already see the big mountain where we can go to. But there are also a lot of people who you really need to draw it out a little bit. So I would not say dictate it, but you really need to explain the how you're going to get where you want to be. Where, for sure, if we look in 10x thinking, where we talked about a lot as well together, sometimes it's about moonshot. And it's not that you're going to make the moonshot, but at least you will be creative, you will be doing something new, something you didn't plan, didn't have thought of, because you're challenging yourself.
Right.
So yeah.
I like that. The believer and dreamer, that's a good 2 lines there. Tell me about the balance between control and curiosity. I know this has been big for you. And when we talk about control the controllables, I mean, that's definitely a really good frame to use that puts things back into your power as opposed to wasting energy on things that you can't influence or can't do anything about. Where does curiosity come in, and how have you learned to dance between those two?
I would say it's still a challenging dance, for sure. With we briefly touched base on the traveling, and if you see all the time differences, but also all the social parts which is around it, it's not always easy. And I really noticed that if I'm rested, I'm way more curious than if I'm not. What is interesting there, if you look at curiosity, I think with collaboration, through curiosity, you go way quicker, you involve people way more, you get way more qualities out of the people. But we also need to keep speed. And there is the dance where you're talking about, like, when are you the let's say really the boss, the decision maker who cuts things off, and when do you give people space to be creative and really let them flourish.
Right.
And I think there's a really fine line, because it's business, so there's a lot of cost. And I think you need to be able to make certain growth, learning, mistakes cost, but it has also like a limit. So there, I always try to make the reference, if it's your money, what would you do with it? And that often helps people, like, hey, would you do the same if it was your own money? I'm sometimes in meetings and I'm like, why are we here with 20 people? Like, if you should pay for this meeting yourself, would you invite these 20 people? Would it be valuable? Yes or no? And then people are then changing perspectives.
Yeah, that's definitely a line you want to get familiar with, because there is a point to wasting time, but also like giving people enough time to tap into their creativity that can lead to new innovation and connecting the dots. So maintaining that pulse.
Yeah.
And if you're low on energy as a leader, you're probably going to miss a lot of those subtleties.
Yeah.
So what have been some of like really helpful strategies that you've used in your travels that have helped you maintain enough energy to do what you need to do? Like, what are the staples that no matter where you're at, what city, what country, these are my go-tos because they get me enough into the mental and emotional space to like be productive?
For me, it's really working out. So I do a lot of running because that's something you can do everywhere.
Yeah.
But for me, really, the running, the sports, the working out is what brings me in the state where I want to be. But it's difficult to do it every day with the time differences, with the traveling, with the lack of sleep. Yeah, you need to imagine like tomorrow I'm flying back to Chicago, but Monday I'm flying to Europe again, and then with the time differences, you skip the night. So I'm flying on Monday afternoon, I worked all day, and then I arrive at 7 in the morning, and at 9:30 I will be in the office having my first meeting. So there is not even a window to work out. So then in the evening to stretch it, I will run, because otherwise, yeah, you crash, you are too tired, and you want to get in the same time zone again. And I read somewhere that you need like 90 days to really get adjusted to like time zone differences. Yeah, for me, it's mainly a few days or a week, maybe 2 weeks, and then I'm already in the next time zone. So there is definitely room for improvement.
Yeah. Yeah, what I've heard is like for every hour, it's 1 day.
Okay, tell me more about it.
Yeah, so if you travel, if your flight, the time difference is 9 hours, and that means ideally 9 days until you're fully integrated into that flow of life. Or if like for me, I travel a lot to the East Coast, so 3 hour difference, that's a 3-day recovery time to like get synced up. Doesn't mean that you still can't perform, but that's a lot. So like if I'm traveling to Mountain Time, it's an hour ahead, Central Time, 2 hours, and then Eastern, all within a 4-day span of time. That's constant change. Although it sounds like an hour, it's not crazy, but like the body, the circadian rhythms, it does have a lag time.
Yeah, I agree. I already noticed it this week with 2 hours of difference, but I mainly start every day at 6 a.m. my first meetings because of Europe as well. So yeah, this week it was still 6 a.m., but it feels different than Chicago because it's then, for my feeling, 8 a.m. So
yeah,
it was a comfortable week this week.
How important is purpose in how you show up as a leader in like a CEO of a company, right? Like, how often are you talking about it? How aware are people about it? And what is a healthy place for it?
That's a fair question. I don't think we talk enough about it, but I also notice that it's not motivating everyone. So it's really the type of people who make certain decisions, who want to work for that purpose and the why. And what I struggle the most with, for sure, in logistics and supply chain, it's like, I can care a lot about the why, but the customers don't. They just want to make bottom line, more money, and I think I hope we're going to get a shift. I think in Europe, for sure, with the Green Deal and everything, a lot of things are changing. So we can really purposely full focus on like sustainability and optimizing emissions and everything. But at the end, the customers just care about the cost. So optimize it, because then it reduces our cost, not the sustainability part.
Yeah, their purpose is money.
Yeah,
yours is it's not that money's not important. It's just impact, and the ecosystem is the most important.
I genuinely believe that if we really are focused on the purpose, really on the sustainability part, the money will follow. And yeah, that's also where we hope in the future to stand out of the crowd and to be a little bit ahead of that curve of what is possible. Because if we look in logistics, but I think it's globally for all markets, it's all about being more resilient for disruption. We all face scarcity in all kind of markets. And then the sustainability part is getting bigger and bigger and more important. So how can we lean into those areas, combine them to be more dynamic, be more agile, and from there serve not only the customers but society. Because of course the biggest joke, which we all know during the pandemic, was the run on toilet paper. We are just so spoiled that when we go to the grocery store or whatsoever, it's just there.
Yeah.
But all the processes before that to get it there, to produce it, yeah, that's a different world.
Yeah. The accessibility and the convenience of everything people take for granted.
Yeah.
I mean, even on a small scale of just how readily available food is. I just did a 72-hour water fast. And I was like, okay, I know that I'm going to eat 72 hours from now because I have access to food. But like our ancestors did not have that. They're like, I got to go hunt still. I got to go forage for berries. I got to go find something. I still got to produce and like utilize energy when I don't even feel like I have any. Like it's just another level of living. We've come a long way, and I don't think people stop to think about that enough.
Yeah, and I think in that sense also, if we correlate that to business, I see a really big difference in mindset in different cultures, in the sense of really giving it all to work your way through your career and making the most out of it, to like work-life balance, which is in Europe a really big deal. Yeah, it's just a completely different mindset. So what I'm trying to say is like, we are getting spoiled and we are changing, and I'm not sure if it's for the good or the better.
Yeah. 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 I think we're getting close to it not being as good for the taking advantage of certain things, and then lack of appreciation for all the components that go into it.
Yeah, it's definitely taking a lot of things are taken for granted.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. What are some hard questions that you purposely wrestle with that you feel help you think clearer or show up more powerfully to either your relationships or business?
If I look to business, I think what I learned over the years is that you need different people for different periods of growth of your company. It's really hard sometimes to see people not accelerating where you hope they accelerate because you care about them. And yeah, I think that reflects back to relationships. Like you meet different people in different phases of your life. You say you welcome people in, but you also say goodbye to a lot of people. And I think for me the struggle is where and when and who serves you or not in certain periods of life.
Yeah. So the question is like, should this person still be in my sphere or in my ecosystem?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's where I struggling with a lot.
Yeah.
And that's mainly because of the demanding part of the job, with all the traveling. So when I travel, for example, to Europe, where I'm from, I travel there for work, but people also expect you to visit, see, and have fun. And for them, it's like a one day in the week, like, oh, fun, we see Gio again. But for me, it's like every day with other people. And then the weeks I'm not there, I'm also traveling and socializing. And that's for me, what I also said today when we met, like, that's intense. Constantly the interaction, the communication, the socializing. I think that's the most demanding part of the job.
Yeah, I think anyone can relate to that as they move through life, whether they have kids or they got married or they have to move to a different city for work. Like their social circle begins to change. Yeah, and depending on the mindset of that person and that sphere of friends, will dictate kind of what each person resonates with, information wise, how they live their life, how fit they are, how their relationships are. And so like, I think at some level, everyone struggles with like, should I be hanging out with this person as much as I do? Or should I even have them in my life anymore? Or how do I tell them I don't want to be around them anymore? Like what have you learned in that you think could be helpful for anyone that's like outgrown your friends is not necessarily the right way to say it. Maybe it is, but it's more so like there's just not a resonance anymore. There's not an alignment.
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with people who care and people who support. So if we talk about the dreamers and the believers,
Yeah.
I think if I look at my close circle, they really support me, and for them it doesn't matter if I'm successful or not. And that's for me like already one big difference in the sense of knowing your people. But also see that with a certain group of people, you also go back to old habits. And there I think the biggest challenge is for myself is like, hey, what do I really want and believe in or not believe in anymore? Mm-hmm. And yeah, there I think is my biggest struggle.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've definitely had some friendships kind of weed themselves out, and also some really beautiful ones. Like some of my most closest people that I am closest to now weren't even at my wedding 7 years ago.
Yeah, it's crazy how
8 years
quick that
ago.
can go.
Yeah. And I'm like, whoa. Like I'm talking people that if they called me, I'm there. Anything, you know? Did not know them less than 8 years ago. Some even 4 years ago. So
we met 3 years ago.
Yeah. So I'm like, man. So there's hope there that, you know, as you maybe let go of some of those friends, that you could invite more in, and that it is possible for that connection to go deeper quicker. Because as you grow, you're more aware, you know what you want, you know what you're looking for, you also know what you can give. And so when you meet someone that aware, that mature, that aligned, it like there's a clicking that happens. It's an organic like chemistry that just flows. And you're like that saying when the movie, did we just become best friends just now? From Step Brothers. That's one of my favorite lines. Yeah, it's important to know. I mean, it's gonna happen at some point.
Yeah, interesting is it's not about how much time you spend with each other. And I think people move for work or in life or relationships or all kind of stuff. You have always people who are around you in the place where you are. And you see if you then move, that group changes. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really the connection you build with people. And when you spend time, how you spend it.
Yeah. Right. How present are you in that time? What's been something that you've been really interested in or curious about in the last 90 days?
Oh, that's a lot. So yeah, I have a lot to figure out myself. I'm gonna move back to Europe. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm curious a lot there. Like, what will change there? I hope to travel a little bit less. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are so many things to be curious about. Like, as you know, for our trip to Costa Rica, I'm researching Socrates.
Yes.
And that's all about curiosity.
Yes.
How his angle is on life and his studies and everything. And what makes me curious from only that already is like, things are so obvious sometimes, but we just are too much in our hamster wheel to see it. So leaning back, sitting back, taking some time to really take things in, properly reflect. I think in the world we live in today, that it's not happening enough.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, what would be different if people would?
Yeah, I just gave a talk at Nike a couple of days ago, and the topic, there were 3 components that I talked about: mind, body, and soul. And the body piece was, the whole point there was like, we move fast in America, in the West. It's always like, how much space can I fill? So my calendar, from the moment I wake up, I'm on my phone, to the moment I go to sleep, like there's no empty space. Because I got to be productive. I got to get things done. I got this, I got that. And it's very much like an obligatory, I have to vibe. And I'm like, it's not until you actually learn to slow down, even if it's momentarily for 5 minutes, that you allow your body to like catch up, but also the genius that your body is, the instrument that it is, to allow the insights to come through so that you can actually process what it is that you're going through, that you're moving through so fast. So like, whether it's a 5-minute breath work session or a 5-minute close your eyes and just mindfulness and meditation, the more stillness we can find in the chaos, the healthier we'll be, the more we'll appreciate what we're doing, the more we'll learn, and the faster we'll recover.
Yeah, it's insane what the body is capable of. And in that sense, how we are abusing our body as
yes. Well. All the time, by what we put in it.
Yeah.
By our lack of movement.
Yeah.
And also the stillness piece, like that's huge. And I just noticed anxiety being on the rise too. Just this anxiousness that we all are kind of operating with, like our feet don't sit still or our mind can never turn off. And it's like, okay, well, it doesn't have to be like that.
No, not at all. And I think 2 years ago when we did the other podcast, I said this as well. Like what I struggled with in the past was always want more and bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And realizing that there is no finish line was really an eye-opener. Because, it's so easy to get stuck in your own hamster wheel.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me more about that. Like what resonated with you with that? Like, because it's easy to fall into more, not just societally, but I think also our spirit, there's a drive to experience more and go on an adventure. So innately, I don't necessarily think it's bad. It's just, how does that manifest in the outward world, right? So what in your mind, you're like, oh, I like that. Like, what did you click, or how did you process that?
The not having a finish line, you mean?
Yeah, or the big and more.
Yeah, so for me, what really stood out is like you set your goals. And I think setting goals is really good because then you work towards something.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing where I was trapped in is that before I reached the goals, I was already expanding them. So, simple, stupid example, like I want to run 10K in X amount of time. And then before I would make it, I already changed the time to faster. So I was sort of self-sabotaging myself.
Mm-hmm.
In never getting my goals, because before I would get to my goal, I already would change it up to be more challenging. And then with that, you start or stop celebrating things because you're never achieving anything. Because before you get it, you already change it up.
Mm-hmm.
So there I changed a lot in setting different goals and really also accomplishing them and finalizing them before setting a new one.
What has that helped you do, and what have you experienced since making those adjustments?
Appreciate people around me more because I was taking them with me in that cycle. Mm-hmm. So also, if we talk about business, if you put a goal for your team and before they achieve it, you change it up already higher, then they also will not achieve or celebrate or whatsoever. So taking a step back, what we already discussed, like the reflecting, getting a breather, pause, to really celebrate achievements which you did together or yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Why? Yeah. I'm going to play devil's advocate here. What if someone hears that and is like, well, yeah, but if you don't continuously raise the bar, then you'll get comfortable. You'll get complacent. And if you're constantly like saying, okay, well, now on to the next, then you're ensuring that there's always going to be growth. What would you say to that?
If we look at the comfortability, it's not that we don't put targets anymore or like that we don't have goals. Mm-hmm. The only thing is that we first try to achieve them before we move to the next. Mm-hmm. So if you look now, for example, our goal for 2030 is 750 million of revenue. Some people look at me then in the company like, where are you getting this number from? And it's too big and whatsoever. But other people really think like, ooh, only 750 million. So it's also the type of people who look differently at certain things. The only thing is like, we put it that number now, and should I then change that number already before we know that we're gonna hit it? Because maybe we see, 750 in 2028. We will see, we are almost there. Let's turn it up to 1 billion or 1.5 billion or whatsoever. But it's more respecting the first goal instead of already blindly passing it over and change it.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Yeah. I imagine the longer you leave it there, the more ideas come about on how to achieve it, and maybe they do achieve it faster, but regardless, achieve it first before you change it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that. Going back to Socrates and the curiosity, what have you learned from how he lived or how he operated that you've began to integrate into how you show up to things?
I caught myself a lot of already having an opinion before I know the whole story. So what I need to learn and integrate more is to first fully discover and listen and being in the unknown. Because we have so many thoughts, we have so many ideas, we have experiences. And what I have noticed is that because of then the connection or the puzzle you already make, you start doing assumptions. And assumptions sometimes can be fine and we can speed up the process, but it will also make you miss a lot of stuff. Mm-hmm. So if you not just translate that to work, but also to life. Yeah. And again, taking that step back, there are so many things we don't appreciate because we just moving on, go quick. What you said, like, hey, we wake up, agenda is full. So we have a lot of assumptions already in what we do, how we do it, why we do it. And I think if you look at Socrates, he mastered himself to being curious and first learning from the people he was engaging with rather than judging.
Which allowed him to grab more data and then make better decisions from there.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a doctor, I'm drawing a blank on her last name, but it's Dr. Ellen something. She was recently on Andrew Huberman's podcast, and they were talking about mindfulness, and she's like the originator of mindfulness back in the 70s, and she's called the mother of mindfulness. She wrote a recent book, but in the podcast, she defined mindfulness and mindlessness, and how mindfulness is active observation. It's understanding that every moment is a learning moment. And when you're mindful, you open up to the world, allowing you to see, process, and learn more from what's around you. And so you actually get energy. People are like, well, if I'm mindful all day, every day, isn't that like energy? Doesn't that cost a lot of energy? Yes, but also you're noticing new things, and the brain loves learning new things and seeing new things. So you're getting energy from the newness. So it's a sustainable model. The mindlessness is just checking things off the list, trying to use as little of the brain as possible. But it's operating from the I already know.
Yeah.
I already know how this conversation is going to go. I've been to this type of training before. Yeah, I've heard someone say that before. It's like they're automatically cutting off the potential of what something could be because they're reading a few patterns that they're correlating to something that happened in the past, which this is what our brain does naturally, but it can cut off new information. And so then you see people in old ways and they never really have an opportunity to change because in your mind, they're unchangeable.
Yeah, they limit their potential.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think with what you just said, that's really on spot with what I meant, like where I also want to grow. Because you navigate a lot from your belief systems, the things you're used to do, which not necessarily are the right way to do it. And yeah, in business, I also see that in myself, like because of your busy agenda, because of your schedule, you sometimes fall back in those automation thinking kind of ways.
Yeah. Yeah, especially if your day looks the same all the time, like logistically, then it's like it could be mundane very, very fast. But asking new questions, structuring meetings differently, having weekly intentionality meetings, like all those things can help spruce up the juiciness of what happens, you know?
Yeah.
So what do a lot of companies out there that you see, that you interact with, get wrong? Like, what do they do that you're like, yeah, that's not helpful for you, for the environment, for whatever? Like, what have you seen that in your opinion you're like, this needs to change?
I would say people pleasing, in the sense of a lot of companies really listen to what people want, and what
People being the customer.
The customer, yeah.
Okay.
Where I would like to focus more on what the customers, the companies need, and I always use the example of Apple.
Yeah.
Which consumer asked Apple to remove the keyboard from the phone? Nobody. But now nobody has a keyboard anymore. So we all know Henry Ford. If he would have asked his customers, like, what do you want? They wanted a faster horse, not a car. So I think we need to step a little bit back from how people are perceiving and doing business. And for me, one of the interesting books is The Challenger Sale, where you also see that you have 4 types of sales people. And the most successful one is the challenger, because the challenger is tailoring the story, is teaching the customer something, so they're helping them to grow and make next steps. And from there, you will have tension, and tension brings creativity, but also builds a relationship. So rather than being the relationship builder, the relationship should come from the business you do together. And I can be really good in relationships, for example, but are you going to give me your business because I'm a likable guy who you can drink a beer with, or are you giving me business because I will help you move your business forward? Mm-hmm. And there I see a really big gap nowadays in real relationships being built between companies, and helping them to accelerate and really help them to get their company goals and targets, and really understand where they struggle.
Yeah, something Jeff Bezos said is like, if when given a choice between conflict or agreement,
conflict.
Yeah, he said conflict every time.
Yeah, me too.
Because on the other side of conflict is growth.
Yeah,
right. If we're always if we're always agreeing with the customer or serving the customer too much, then it's almost like that spouse or that partner that always does what you want to do but never says what they want to do.
Yeah.
You know, it becomes one-sided.
Yeah.
Whereas like what Steve Jobs did so well was he was able to anticipate through intuition and instincts to see something that no one else could see, which to your earlier point is like, as a leader, you're not a leader if you're not going first into the unknown. Otherwise, you're just waiting for someone else to do it and then you'll follow. And there's nothing wrong with being a follower, but if you want to be a leader, you gotta innovate, you gotta trailblaze, you gotta go first, and you gotta lead something, you know, and that requires a new idea. And so
you need to make the mistakes.
Yeah. And be okay with that as a part of the process. And so what Jobs did so well was like, he even told his team, he's like, our job is to read what's not on the page.
Yeah.
And take people there. And so they're like, what does that even mean, Steve? He's like,
removing the keyboard from the phone.
Yeah, exactly. But so you got to believe in something so strong and then work backwards from there and fill in the gap between where people are and where your vision is, right? And that's storytelling. That is the challenging. That's the educating and the teaching. And people may be resistant to it because they like what they know.
Where they are comfortable with.
Exactly. But what they're comfortable with isn't always what's best for them. People could be comfortable in a toxic relationship because they're afraid to be alone, so they'll stay in it. But that doesn't mean it's healthy, right? So just because you aren't comfortable with it doesn't mean it's not good for you. So if we had collectively a bit more curiosity and open-mindedness with ideas, we can try them on a little bit longer and realize that, oh, the way I'm currently doing something that isn't really working right now doesn't have to be like that. And there's a lot of people out there that are demonstrating something that I could embody and therefore change how my body looks, how my mind operates, how my lifestyle is currently unfolding, and eventually get to where I want to go faster, maybe, most likely, but also more enjoyable.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And in that sense, we are animals of habits.
Yes.
We don't like change. We want to do what we know. And I think there is also the opportunity for people, for companies, for society, to be more in the unknown and learn and grow.
Yeah. I've definitely felt my capacity to hold the unknown and the uncertainty grow. And I mean, there's a lot of work that I've done on myself in regards to that, but people live in a bubble. A lot of people don't ever travel outside of their city. And so especially in America, like we live in such a bubble here that until you travel to like third world countries or you go outside to something completely different than America, you don't have any contrast. You think that what you see on the news is reality. And we all know what we see on the news is just dramatized to sell.
It's also controlled.
Exactly. So, you know, as someone who's listening to this, you got to do your own research on what you believe. Alex Hormozy, who's a business owner, I really enjoy his content. He said, if you can't articulate why you believe what you believe, then it's not your belief. It's someone else's.
Yeah, and it's not getting easier nowadays with all the social media platforms and all the fake news, what is also getting thrown in the world.
Yep.
So I think that research part is really important to also learn and understand who you are, who you want to be.
Yeah, which goes back to your curiosity piece, right? Like, why do I do these things when it happens? Like, why in meetings do I not raise my hand and share my ideas? Why do I eat this way after certain things happen? Why do I show up to social situations like this? Until you actually generate curiosity for those questions, you're just going to continue to do the same thing. And our brains and our bodies are designed for survival, so you're only going to exert what's needed. But if you want greatness, if you want a life that is on your terms and successful, then you're going to have to give a little bit more, knowing that on the back end, you're going to get that investment back.
No, yeah, definitely. It's interesting because one of my friends, he just went to a rebranding, and he is all focused about live more with less limits. And I think that pretty resonates with what you just said.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. Yeah, on branding, like I think branding is everything for business and even for your own life. Like, what is your own personal brand? You know, if you look at it like as you are as your own business, how do you view brands? Like, if you think about what a brand is, how do you define that? And then maybe take that professionally or take that personally, but then what do you do with that information?
I think it's a fine line, first of all. I have a hate and love relationship with it. Because on one hand, I want to be anonymous. On the other hand, I'm trying to build a big business.
Yeah.
So that's conflicting. But coming back to your question, I think for branding, what is really important is in the basis trust. If it's a company branding or a personal branding, trust is the biggest angle and important thing, from my opinion, to build a good brand. Yeah. Trustworthiness.
That fits with, I can't remember who said it off the top of my head. Maybe it was Peter Drucker or maybe it was someone else, but they said a brand is just a promise that you're going to do what you say you're going to do. And then that builds trust over time. Do you keep your promises?
And if you don't keep them, there is no trust.
There's no brand.
Bad brand.
Yeah, bad brand. So if we take that personally and like each of us is our own brand.
It's all about ethics and staying in integrity with your own belief system.
Yeah. And one of my favorite definitions for integrity is by Michael Gervais. He was the previous sports psychologist for the Seattle Seahawks football team. He said integrity is when your thoughts and your actions align.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think a lot of people are really good in talking, but not in pulling through.
Yeah.
And I think there you really see a big difference of people who make it or break it.
Right. And that's why pressure and conflict is so important, because you see who people really are under pressure.
Yeah. And you can do a beautiful performance, but it's about consistency and longevity, what will confirm or put you down in that sense. So for me, branding, it's all about building and creating and keeping trust.
Yeah. Fundamental. Going to the work-life balance. I mean, I know you're from Europe, right? Most of your life you've lived there, and the morals are a bit different than in the West as far as like that work-life balance type of lifestyle. What have you kept from that, having lived in the States for the last few years? What are the, so I guess my question would be, what differences have you seen now having lived in both cultures? And then what have you kept alive as you've continued to push boundaries and build big business?
The biggest difference, I think, everything here in the US is incentive driven, where I'm more focused, and in Europe it's more purpose driven, I think, and less focused on incentives. If you look at bonuses and all that kind of stuff.
So incentives tied to money.
Yeah.
Got it.
Indeed. And yeah, what I'm really surprised of is that in the US, people not really take a break. So in Europe, we can laugh about it, but July, August, you can try to pick up the phone, but
yeah, like 3 weeks of vacation, easy.
We will not sell anything in those months. Everyone is off. All the decision makers are on vacation. So, and here I not really see that. Like if somebody goes on vacation for a week, it feels already for them like
too long.
Am I doing something wrong? Will I keep my job? I don't know. Where we have 5 weeks of vacation or 6 weeks, and we really use them. And I think that is also really important to disconnect and come back with a fresh mind instead of constantly keep on going. Mm-hmm. So I think a mix would be healthy. Mm-hmm. I think the biggest difference is comfort. Gary Vee said it once, like hiring is guessing, firing is knowing. But there is a big difference in Europe versus the US, because in the US you can easier hire and fire, where in Europe, that's almost impossible to fire. You really need to document everything really well. You need to be able to prove that you tried everything in your power to make it work, which then also creates a little bit more of that comfort for the people, where they maybe get a little bit more lazy. Yeah. Which then demotes a little bit the drive of working hard, grinding, and really building your career. So I'm not saying that's bad or wrong. I just believe that a healthy mix would be better of the both worlds.
Is English how young were you when you learned English?
I'm still learning.
Yeah. But your native language is what?
My native language is Dutch.
Okay.
Ja.
Ja. En so
denk niet dat je daar veel van kan maken als ik Nederlands praat.
Yes. When you're listening to English speakers, I growing my compassion for people who speak multiple languages, because there's like a translation that's happening in real time that your brain almost has to work faster to take that word and then correlate it to your native language and then bring back another word that then makes sense in English. And English is a really hard language to learn because it's messy and dynamic, and it feels like it's changing every year with all the like slang that happens, you know? How does your mind work with that? And I mean, your English, from my understanding, is pretty good.
Thank you.
But the diversity, a lot of times in the companies that I work with, there's a lot of multi-bilingual speakers, right? And sometimes the quietness or the reserved nature of someone who speaks multiple languages is not that they're not confident. It's just that they need time to translate what you just said in a way that they understand it to then tell you what you're wanting. So how does that process work for you?
So definitely expressing myself is easier in Dutch because it's my native language.
Sure.
So sometimes I'm searching for words, or like, how can I in the best way explain what I'm trying to say.
Right.
Vocabulary wise, I also think you're limited, because probably you have, for one word, you have 10 expressions and I just know that one word. But yeah, for me, I not really notice anymore if I think or dream in Dutch or in English at this moment.
That's good.
I'm not saying that I'm fluent and perfectly in English, but at least I'm so now used to just speak English that I sometimes need to search for words in Dutch, which I not often use, for example. And going back to your previous question, like, yeah, we start with English, I think, on elementary school. But yeah, in high school it's very, we get like French, we get like German, we get English, like can choose Spanish. Nowadays there's also Chinese. So yeah, I think we are we are a small country, and yeah, where do you speak Dutch? Not many places in the world. But we have a lot of history. So New York, they voted to speak Dutch or English, and they chose English. But
yeah, well,
could have been completely different.
True.
New York was New Amsterdam.
Yeah.
Brooklyn is Breukelen. It's like, it's interesting how that goes.
Wow. Okay. What else does the audience need to know that you think is important in regards to business or building something that you're proud of?
I really believe that you need to enjoy what you do, and need to accept that you will really go in from challenge to challenge, from chaos to chaos, from disruption to disruption. Every time I think like, oh, now we're going to get into easy waters, and then before I think it already something disrupts it. So become comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Yeah. Especially if you're growth minded.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because discomfort is going to find you regardless, but if you're purposely seeking it out, then.
Yeah, I would be getting pretty bored quickly, I think. If it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. All right. Well, Gio, thank you for the type of leader that you are. Thank you for the integrity that you operate with. Thank you for your insights and your wisdom, and thank you all for listening, being here. Appreciate you, and take any insights that you learned today, whether it's curiosity, control the controllables, operating with integrity, pruning relationships that no longer serve. Whatever you grasped onto today, take that so that you can build an intentional life. Because it goes fast, and you got to be the right building blocks is important. So go out there, be your own 1%, and until next time, much love.